Jake Morrison stood in the middle of what looked like the biggest junkyard in the galaxy. The air smelled of burnt metal and ozone, and everywhere he looked there were piles of broken alien technology. His boots crunched on pieces of shattered crystal that had once been part of some advanced computer system. The Zephyrians had left this place 3 months ago when they pulled back from the Outer Rim territories, and they had not bothered to clean up after themselves. Amy Collins picked up a twisted piece of metal that was still warm to the touch. She turned it over in her hands and shook her head. The thing had clearly been some kind of weapon component, but now it was just scrap. Half of its surface was melted, and the other half was covered in burn marks. She tossed it back onto the pile with a sound of disgust. "Commander, this stuff is completely worthless," she said to Jake. "Look at this mess. Everything here is burned out, or broken, or both. The power systems are fried, the control circuits are melted, and most of these components are so damaged I cannot even tell what they used to be." Jake nodded as he walked between the towering piles of discarded technology. The depot stretched for miles in every direction, filled with the technological refuse of one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. When the Zephyrians had built this place, it had been a major supply hub for their military forces. Now it was just a graveyard of broken dreams and failed experiments. Pete Davis was on his hands and knees, next to a pile of what looked like engine parts. His uniform was already dirty from crawling around in the debris, but he did not seem to care. He had found something that interested him, and when Pete Davis found something interesting, everyone else learned to pay attention. "Hey, Commander," Pete called out, without looking up from his work. "Come, take a look at this." Jake walked over to where Pete was working. The chief engineer had cleared away some of the smaller debris to reveal what looked like the remains of a power coupling system. The main housing was cracked down the middle, and most of the internal components were clearly beyond repair, but Pete was staring at it like he had found buried treasure. "This is from a Zephyrian battleship," Pete explained, running his hands over the damaged metal. "These power couplings can handle more energy than anything we have back on Earth. Even broken like this, the basic design is decades ahead of our best technology." Amy Collins walked over to join them. She looked at the broken coupling, and then at Pete, like he had lost his mind. "Pete, that thing is completely destroyed. Half of it is missing, and the other half is melted. What good is advanced technology if it does not work?" Pete stood up and wiped his hands on his uniform. His eyes had that look they got when he was thinking about a particularly interesting engineering problem. Jake had seen that look before, and it usually meant that Pete was about to suggest something that would either be brilliant or completely insane. "That is exactly my point," Pete said with growing excitement. "We keep thinking about this stuff the wrong way. We look at it and see broken alien technology that we cannot fix or understand. But what if we stopped trying to fix it their way?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Pete gestured at the piles of debris surrounding them. "The aliens build everything to be perfect. Every component has to work exactly right. Every system has to be integrated just so. Every safety protocol has to be followed to the letter. That is why when something breaks, they throw it away. They cannot imagine using it for anything else." Amy was starting to look interested despite herself. "But we are not aliens." "Exactly," Pete said, slapping his hand against the broken power coupling. "We are humans. We have been making broken things work since we invented the first tool. When our cars break down, we fix them with whatever we can find. When our computers crash, we jury-rig solutions that the original designers never thought of. When our weapons jam in combat, we find ways to make them work anyway." Jake was beginning to see where Pete was going with this. "You are talking about salvaging this technology." "Not salvaging," Pete corrected. "Improving. These Zephyrian power couplings operate on principles our engineers barely understand. But the basic concept is still the same as our fusion reactors. Energy goes in one end, gets processed, and comes out the other end ready to use. The details are different, but the fundamentals are the same. Amy picked up another piece of debris, this one looking like part of a weapon system. But even if we could understand how this stuff works, we do not have the tools or materials to repair it properly. Pete grinned. Who said anything about repairing it properly? We are humans, Amy. We do not need proper. We need effective. Look, around this place. There are thousands of tons of broken alien technology here. Power systems, weapons, shields, sensors, computers, everything a military force could need. None of it works the way it is supposed to anymore, but that does not matter. Jake was starting to get excited now. The idea was crazy, but it was the kind of crazy that might actually work. You want to combine different pieces of broken alien technology to create something new. Not just combine, Pete said, his voice rising with enthusiasm. Transform, rebuild, reimagine. Take a Zephyrian power coupling that can handle massive energy loads, connect it to a Kaltorian weapon system that was designed for different power specifications, and bridge the gap with human engineering and human determination. Amy looked skeptical. That sounds incredibly dangerous. These systems were never designed to work together. The power levels alone could be enough to blow up half a planet. Pete nodded cheerfully. Probably. But if we can make it work without blowing ourselves up, we would have weapons and technology that no one in the galaxy has ever seen before. The aliens design everything according to their own limitations and assumptions. They would never think to combine technologies from different species, or to push systems beyond their designed parameters. Jake walked to the top of a nearby pile of debris and looked out over the vast expanse of the depot. Everywhere he could see were the discarded remnants of alien civilizations. Broken weapons that had once destroyed entire fleets. Damaged shields that had once protected mighty warships. Burned out engines that had once driven vessels faster than light across the galaxy. For the first time since humanity had made contact with the galactic community, Jake saw opportunity instead of disadvantage. The major powers of the galaxy had technology that was centuries ahead of anything Earth could produce. Their weapons could vaporize human ships with single shots. Their shields could deflect every weapon in the human arsenal, and their fleets outnumbered human forces by thousands to one. But they all had one weakness. They thought like civilized beings. They followed rules and protocols and safety standards. They built their technology to work within acceptable parameters, and to fail safely when pushed beyond those limits. Humans had never been particularly concerned with acceptable parameters. Pete, Jake said, turning back to face his chief engineer. How long would it take to set up a proper research facility here? Pete looked around at the endless piles of salvageable technology and smiled. Give me a month to get the basic infrastructure in place. Give me 3 months to start producing results. Give me 6 months, and I will show you weapons that will make the galaxy sit up and take notice. Jake nodded. Do it. And Pete, yes, sir. Find me the most creative engineers and technicians in the human fleet. The kind of people who think that instruction manuals are just suggestions. The kind of people who see a problem and immediately start figuring out 17 different ways to solve it with whatever happens to be lying around. Pete grinned. I know just the people for the job. As Jake looked out over the alien scrapyard, he felt something he had not experienced since humanity first encountered the galactic community. Hope. The major powers of the galaxy had spent centuries perfecting their technology and their military doctrine. They knew exactly how everything was supposed to work and exactly what was possible. They were about to learn that humans had never been very good at accepting limitations. Lisa Warren stood in the middle of what used to be an empty research station and watched her team work magic with alien junk. 6 weeks had passed since Jake Morrison had given her the job of turning a scrapyard into a weapons laboratory, and the results were already beyond anything she had imagined possible. The station buzzed with activity, day and night. Engineers and technicians from every branch of the human military had volunteered for the project, and Lisa had carefully selected the ones who had reputations for being too creative for their own good. These were the people who had been written up for unauthorized modifications to standard equipment, who had been transferred between departments for asking too many questions, and who had been passed over for promotion because their methods were considered unconventional. In other words, they were exactly the kind of people who could look at a pile of broken alien technology and see possibilities instead of problems. Bobby Chen was hunched over a workbench that was covered with what looked like the electronic equivalent of a battlefield. Pieces of Zephyrian plasma conduits were connected to Earth-made car parts through a tangle of wires that would have horrified any self-respecting electrical engineer. Bobby himself looked like he had not slept in days, but his eyes were bright, with the excitement of someone who had just solved an impossible puzzle. "Dr. Warren," Bobby called out without looking up from his work. "Come check this out. I think I figured out the power regulation problem." Lisa walked over to Bobby's workstation and tried not to wince at the sight of advanced alien technology being held together with electrical tape and determination. "Show me what you have." Bobby gestured at his creation with obvious pride. "Okay. So the problem was that these Zephyrian plasma conduits operate at power levels that would fry any human-made electronic system. The energy frequencies are completely outside the range of anything our technology was designed to handle. A direct connection would be like trying to power a light bulb with a nuclear reactor." Lisa nodded. She had seen the test results from the early experiments, and the words catastrophic overload had appeared in the reports with disturbing frequency. "But then I remembered something from my days working in automotive repair," Bobby continued. "Car alternators are designed to take variable input from the engine and convert it to steady electrical output for the car's systems. The principles are the same, just scaled up about 1,000,000 times." Bobby pointed to a device that looked like it had been assembled by someone who had access to a junkyard and a very active imagination. "I took 3 car alternators and connected them in series, then used some creative wiring to create a step-down converter that can handle the power output from these alien conduits. It is not pretty, but it works." To demonstrate his point, Bobby activated the system. The jury-rigged device hummed quietly for a moment, then settled into a steady rhythm. The power readings on Bobby's jury-rigged instruments showed a clean, stable output that was well within the range of human technology. "Bobby, this is brilliant," Lisa said, genuinely impressed. "How did you think to combine 21st century automotive parts with alien plasma technology?" Bobby grinned. "Easy. I stopped thinking like an engineer and started thinking like a mechanic. Engineers design things to work perfectly under ideal conditions. Mechanics make things work under whatever conditions they happen to find themselves in." Across the laboratory, Danny Rodriguez was having a similar breakthrough with weapons systems. Danny had been a demolitions expert before transferring to the research project, and he had a talent for finding creative ways to make things explode. He was standing next to what looked like a piece of mining equipment that had been modified far beyond its original specifications. "Dr. Warren, you have got to see this," Danny said, with the kind of enthusiasm that usually meant someone was about to demonstrate something dangerous. "Remember those energy projectors we salvaged from the Zephyrian mining operation? The ones that were designed to cut through solid rock?" Lisa remembered them well. The projectors were impressive pieces of technology, capable of focusing energy beams with incredible precision. But they were mining tools, not weapons. And they had built-in safety systems that prevented them from being used for anything other than their intended purpose. "I figured out how to bypass the safety protocols," Danny said, patting the side of the modified device like it was a favorite pet. "Turns out that if you remove the limiters that prevent overcharge and reroute the power flow to ignore the automatic shutoffs, these things become incredibly effective weapons." Danny activated the device and aimed it at a target made of the same material used in alien ship hulls. The energy beam that emerged was nothing like the precise cutting tool the device had been designed to be. Instead, It was a concentrated lance of destruction that vaporized the target in less than a second. The aliens would never think to weaponize mining equipment, Danny explained. They have specialized weapons for combat and specialized tools for industry, and they never mix the two. But we do not have the luxury of specialization. We have to make everything into a weapon if we want to survive. Lisa walked around the modified mining projector and tried to understand what she was seeing. The device should not have been able to function as a weapon. Every safety system should have prevented it from operating outside its designed parameters. But somehow Danny had found a way to make it work anyway. "How did you override the safety protocols?" she asked. Danny pointed to a section of the device, where alien circuitry had been replaced with human-made components. The safety systems were designed by the original manufacturers to be tip-proof, but they were designed to be tip-proofed by other aliens who think the same way they do. They never considered what would happen if someone approached the problem from a completely different angle. Lisa began to understand what was happening in her laboratory. Her team was not trying to reverse engineer alien technology in the traditional sense. They were not attempting to understand every component and replicate every system. Instead, they were treating the alien technology like raw material to be shaped and molded into something entirely new. Across the laboratory, other teams were making similar breakthroughs. Sue Palmer had figured out how to use Kaltorian shield generators as power amplifiers for human-made weapons. Rick Davis had discovered that Vulcan sensor arrays could be modified to disrupt enemy targeting systems. Janet Brooks had found a way to turn alien communications equipment into jamming devices that could blind entire fleets. Each breakthrough was built on the same principle: human creativity applied to alien technology without regard for the original designer's intentions or limitations. Lisa called her team together for their daily progress meeting. Engineers and technicians gathered around a central workspace that was covered with blueprints, technical diagrams, and prototype devices that looked like they had been assembled by mad scientists. "What we are doing here has never been attempted before," Lisa told her team. "Every other species in the galaxy approaches technology with the assumption that there is a right way and a wrong way to build things. They follow established protocols and accepted standards." She gestured at the chaotic collection of hybrid devices surrounding them. "We are proving that there is another way. We are not trying to build perfect technology. We are building effective technology. We are not following anyone else's rules or limitations." Bobby Chen raised his hand. "Dr. Warren, have we considered what happens when the galaxy finds out what we are doing? The major powers are not going to be happy when they realize that their discarded technology is being turned into weapons that can threaten them." Lisa smiled. "Let them be unhappy. For centuries, the galactic powers have maintained their dominance through technological superiority. They have kept primitive species like humanity in line by making sure we never had access to weapons that could challenge them." She picked up one of Danny's modified mining projectors and hefted its weight. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed that advanced technology could only be used in the ways they intended it to be used. They never considered what would happen if someone came along who was willing to ignore all their assumptions and limitations. Janet Brooks spoke up. "Ma'am, what is our ultimate goal here? Are we trying to build a few prototype weapons? Or are we trying to change the balance of power in the galaxy?" Lisa set down the weapon and looked at her team. These were the people who had been dismissed as too unconventional by the mainstream scientific establishment. They were the engineers who thought that instruction manuals were suggestions rather than laws. They were the technicians who believed that any problem could be solved with enough creativity and determination. "Both," she said simply. "We are going to build weapons that can challenge any technology in the galaxy, and we are going to do it using their own discarded junk." The laboratory fell quiet for a moment as her team absorbed the implications of what she was saying. Then Danny Rodriguez grinned and picked up a piece of alien technology that he had been working on. "Well then," he said, I guess we better get back to work. Nick Turner stood on the bridge of the Defiant and watched 3 Kaltorian destroyers move into attack formation. His ship was nothing special by galactic standards. Just a standard Earth cruiser that would barely qualify as a patrol boat compared to the massive warships that dominated space in this region. But hidden within the Defiant's unremarkable hull were the fruits of 6 months of work by Lisa Warren's research team. Grace Miller looked up from her communications station with concern written across her face. Captain, the Kaltorians are demanding our immediate surrender. They want us to prepare for boarding and inspection. Nick almost laughed at that. The Kaltorians had been raiding human shipping lanes for 8 months, attacking merchant vessels and stealing cargo with complete impunity. Their destroyers were equipped with energy shields that could deflect every weapon in the human arsenal, and their own weapons could punch through human armor like it was made of paper. At least, that had been true until now. Grace, open a channel to the lead Kaltorian vessel, Nick ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the Kaltorian destroyer. Captain Vexstar was a typical member of his species, with reptilian features and cold eyes that showed no trace of mercy or compassion. His uniform was decorated with the honors he had earned during previous raids against defenseless human ships. Human Commander Vexstar said in the Universal Translator's flat monotone, "Your vessel has violated Kaltorian territorial claims. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Your crew will be processed for slavery, and your ship will be claimed as salvage." Nick studied the alien captain for a moment. Vexstar had the confident look of someone who had never faced a real challenge. The Kaltorians had grown comfortable attacking human vessels because they knew that human technology was no match for their advanced systems. "I have a counter-proposal," Nick replied calmly. "You turn your ships around and leave this system immediately. In exchange, I will not demonstrate why you should never underestimate scavengers." Vexstar's reptilian features twisted into what humans had learned was the Kaltorian equivalent of laughter. "You amuse me, human. Your primitive weapons cannot even scratch our shields. Your pathetic vessel poses no threat to ships of the Kaltorian Navy." The alien captain cut the transmission without waiting for a reply. Immediately, all 3 Kaltorian destroyers opened fire with their primary weapons. Energy beams that could vaporize asteroids struck the Defiant's hull with enough force to destroy a dozen human ships. The beams splashed harmlessly against the Defiant's shields. Tony Martinez looked up from his tactical station with amazement. "Captain, our shields are holding. The Kaltorian weapons are not even causing fluctuations in our defensive grid." Nick nodded with satisfaction. The Defiant's shields were built around Zephyrian mining equipment that had been modified far beyond its original specifications. The alien mining operations had used shield technology to protect their workers from the dangerous environment of asteroid mining. Lisa Warren's team had discovered that the same technology could be adapted to deflect weapons fire, especially when powered by human fusion reactors that operated at energy levels the original designers had never imagined. "Status report on their weapons," Nick ordered. Tony studied his displays for a moment. "Sir, the Kaltorian energy weapons are operating exactly within their designed parameters. They are following standard galactic protocols for ship-to-ship combat. Their targeting systems are optimized for engaging vessels with conventional shield technology. In other words, the Kaltorians were fighting exactly the way they had always fought. They were using tried and tested tactics against enemies who used tried and tested technology. But the Defiant was not using tried and tested technology. The Defiant was using technology that should not have existed." "Tony, show our guests what we have been working on," Nick said. Tony Martinez had been one of Lisa Warren's star pupils during the development of the hybrid weapon systems. He understood better than almost anyone how the new technology worked. And more importantly, he understood how to use it effectively in combat. The weapons that emerged from the Defiant were unlike anything that had ever been seen in galactic warfare. They were based on alien technology, but they operated according to principles that no alien species had ever considered. Zephyrian power systems had been connected to Kaltorian energy projectors through human-made interfaces that ignored every safety protocol ever written. The result was a weapon system that operated outside the parameters of known physics. The lead Celtorian destroyer simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, firing its weapons at what it assumed was a helpless human vessel. The next moment, it was nothing but expanding gas and debris. On the bridge of the second Kaltorian destroyer, alarms were screaming, and crew members were shouting in confusion. Their instruments were telling them that the human vessel had just fired a weapon that was physically impossible. The energy readings were off the scale, and the weapon's signature matched nothing in their extensive databases. Captain Vexstar had survived the destruction of his flagship by the simple luck of being aboard the second destroyer when the battle began. Now he stared at his tactical displays with growing horror, as he realized that everything he thought he knew about human military capabilities had just been proven wrong. "All ships, concentrate fire on the human vessel," he ordered. "Maximum power to all weapons systems." The remaining two Kaltorian destroyers opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams, particle cannons, and plasma torpedoes struck the Defiant in a sustained bombardment that should have reduced the human ship to its component atoms. The Defiant's shields held without even flickering. Nick Turner watched the alien weapons fire splash harmlessly against his ship's defenses and felt a sense of satisfaction that went beyond simple victory. For months, human merchant ships had been sitting ducks for Kaltorian raiders. Human crews had died knowing that their weapons were useless against alien technology, and their ships had been captured or destroyed with casual ease. Today, that was going to change. "Tony, target their shield generators," Nick ordered. The Defiant's weapons fired again, but this time they were configured differently. Instead of the raw, destructive power that had eliminated the first destroyer, these weapons were designed to disrupt the specific type of shield technology that the Kaltorians used. Lisa, Warren's team had studied captured Kaltorian equipment for months, learning how their shields operated and what weaknesses they might have. The weapons that Tony fired were tailored specifically to exploit those weaknesses. The second Kaltorian destroyer's shields failed in a cascade of overloaded systems. Without their protective energy barriers, the alien vessel was helpless against CONVENTIONAL human weapons. The Defiant's secondary guns, which had been useless against shielded targets, now tore through the destroyer's hull with devastating effect. Captain Vexstar had time for one final transmission before his ship exploded around him. "Impossible," he said, his reptilian features twisted with disbelief. "Human technology cannot do this." The third Kaltorian destroyer did not even try to fight. Its captain had watched two of the most advanced warships in the Kaltorian fleet destroyed by a vessel that his instruments insisted was nothing more than a primitive human cruiser. He ordered an immediate retreat, pushing his engines to maximum power in a desperate attempt to escape. The Defiant let him go. Nick Turner sat back in his command chair and watched the surviving Kaltorian destroyer disappear into hyperspace. The alien captain would return to his home world with a story that no one would believe. He would report that a single human vessel had destroyed two Kaltorian destroyers using weapons that operated outside the known laws of physics. The Kaltorian High Command would probably assume that their captain had suffered some kind of mental breakdown. "Grace, send a message to Earth Command," Nick ordered. "Tell them that the field test of our new systems was completely successful. Tell them that the Defiant is ready for full operational deployment." Grace Miller worked at her communications station for a moment, then looked up with a smile. "Message sent, Captain. What are our orders now?" Nick studied the tactical display, which showed the positions of known Kaltorian patrol routes throughout this region of space. For months, those patrol routes had been no-go zones for human shipping. Merchant vessels that entered Kaltorian space were captured or destroyed, and human warships were too outgunned to provide effective protection. But that had been before the Defiant. "Plot a course for the main Kaltorian shipping lane," Nick ordered. "It is time to return the favor." Tony Martinez looked up from his tactical station with concern. "Sir, there are at least a dozen Kaltorian patrol ships operating in that area. They will outnumber us 12 to 1. Nick smiled grimly. "Tony, 3 hours ago we were outgunned by 3 Kaltorian destroyers. How did that work out for them?" Tony grinned and began plotting the course. "Aye, sir. Setting course for the Kaltorian shipping lanes." As the Defiant turned toward its next target, Nick reflected on what had just happened. The galaxy had spent centuries assuming that technological superiority was permanent, that advanced civilizations would always dominate primitive ones. The major powers had grown comfortable in their dominance, secure in the knowledge that their weapons and shields were beyond the reach of lesser species. Today, the Defiant had proven that assumption wrong. Human ingenuity, applied to alien technology, had created weapons that could challenge any force in the galaxy. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and it would be built on the foundation of what others had thrown away. Kate Sullivan sat behind her desk and read the combat reports that kept arriving from across human space. Each report told the same story. Human vessels equipped with the new hybrid technology were winning battles that should have been impossible. Ships that had been outgunned and outnumbered were defeating alien forces that had dominated their regions for decades. Frank Lewis stood beside her desk, holding a datapad that contained the latest intelligence reports from the galactic community. The colonel looked tired, and Kate could understand why. The political situation throughout the galaxy was changing so rapidly that the intelligence services could barely keep track of what was happening. "Admiral, the Galactic Council is in complete chaos," Frank reported. "The major powers are demanding explanations for how humanity has advanced so rapidly. Some of them are accusing Earth of receiving illegal technology transfers from unknown alien benefactors." Kate almost laughed at the irony. If the alien powers only knew the truth, they would be even more upset than they already were. The weapons that were revolutionizing human military capabilities were built from the same technology that the aliens had discarded as worthless junk. "What are they saying specifically?" Kate asked. Frank consulted his datapad. "The Zep are claiming that human weapons signatures do not match any known technology in their databases. The Kaltorians are insisting that our shield technology violates several galactic treaties regarding defensive systems. The Velkan Confederation is demanding access to our research facilities to verify that we are not using banned weapons." Kate shook her head. The aliens were so focused on their own assumptions about how technology should work that they could not imagine any other possibilities. They assumed that advanced weapons could only come from advanced civilizations, and since they considered humanity to be primitive, they were looking for some other explanation. "Have any of them figured out what we are actually doing?" Kate asked. Frank smiled grimly. "Admiral, they are not even close." The Galactic Technology Assessment Board released a report last week that concluded our weapons must be based on some form of exotic matter manipulation. The Interspecies Military Analysis Committee thinks we have discovered a new type of energy that does not interact with conventional shielding. Kate walked to the window of her office and looked out at the orbital shipyards that surrounded Earth's primary space station. The shipyards were busier than they had ever been, with construction crews working around the clock to retrofit existing vessels with the new hybrid technology. In the 6 months since Nick Turner's victory over the Kaltorian raiders, every human military vessel had been equipped with weapons and shields based on salvaged alien technology. The retrofit program had been the largest military construction project in human history, and the results were already changing the balance of power throughout the galaxy. "Frank, what is the current status of our salvage operations?" The colonel checked another section of his datapad. That is where things get really interesting, Admiral. We are receiving reports that several alien civilizations have started cleaning up their waste disposal sites. The Zephyrians have recalled their salvage fleet from the outer RIM territories and are implementing new protocols for the disposal of damaged military equipment. Kate raised an eyebrow. They are finally realizing that leaving advanced technology where humans can find it might not be wise. It gets better, Frank continued. The Kaltorians have issued new regulations requiring all damaged equipment to be destroyed rather than simply discarded. The Velkan Confederation has established armed patrols around their former technology dumps, and the Krothic hegemony has actually started hiring mercenaries to guard their old battlefields. Kate smiled at that news. The major galactic powers were scrambling to protect technology that they had previously considered worthless, but they were closing the barn door after the horse had already escaped. Human salvage teams had been collecting alien debris for months, and the research facilities were already working on the next generation of hybrid weapons. Admiral, Frank said, there is something else you need to know. We are getting reports from our intelligence sources that some of the smaller alien powers are beginning to copy our methods. Kate turned away from the window. What do you mean? The Draknari Republic has apparently started their own salvage operations, collecting technology from multiple species and trying to combine them into new weapons systems. The hegemony of Tar is attempting to reverse engineer captured human hybrid devices. Even the Galactic Council has established a special research committee to study unconventional technology applications. Kate considered this information carefully. The humans had proven that advanced technology could be used in ways that its original creators had never imagined. Now other species were beginning to realize that their own assumptions about proper technology use might have been limiting their potential. How successful have these other species been? Frank consulted his notes. Not very. According to our sources, the Draknari managed to blow up half of their primary research facility when they tried to connect Zephyrian power systems to Kaltorian weapons without proper safety protocols. The hegemony of Tar has been unable to replicate our shield technology because they keep trying to make it work according to their own engineering principles. Kate nodded. The other species were making the same mistake that the aliens had always made. They were trying to follow rules and protocols and safety standards. They were attempting to create perfect technology instead of effective technology. The aliens are still thinking like civilized beings, Kate observed. They want their hybrid technology to work cleanly and efficiently and safely. They cannot imagine pushing systems beyond their design limits or ignoring safety protocols that were put in place for good reasons. Frank smiled. Exactly. They are trying to create technology that meets galactic standards for reliability and safety. Meanwhile, our engineers are willing to build weapons that might explode if you look at them wrong, as long as they work long enough to destroy the enemy. Kate walked back to her desk and activated her personal computer. The screen displayed a tactical map of known space, with human territory marked in blue and the various alien powers shown in different colors. 6 months ago, human space had been a small cluster of systems surrounded by hostile alien empires. Now, human territory was expanding in every direction as alien raiders and patrol fleets found themselves outgunned by vessels they had previously considered harmless. What is the status of our next-generation research projects? Kate asked. Frank looked pleased with himself. Admiral Lisa Warren's team has been working on some truly remarkable developments. They have figured out how to integrate Velkan shield generators with our missile systems, creating weapons that actually use enemy shields to amplify their own destructive power. Kate stared at him. They turned enemy shields into weapons. That is not even the most impressive part, Frank continued. They have also developed a targeting system based on modified Draknari communication arrays that can lock onto enemy vessels through their own sensor networks. Essentially, we are using the enemy's own technology to defeat them. Kate shook her head in amazement. Her engineers were not just building better weapons, they were creating entirely new forms of warfare based on principles that no galactic military had ever considered. Frank, I want you to prepare a full briefing for the Defense Committee. I want them to understand exactly what we have accomplished and what we are planning to accomplish. Frank nodded. Yes, ma'am. Should one include projections for future expansion of our capabilities? Kate looked back at the tactical display. Human space was still small compared to the major galactic powers, but it was growing every day. More importantly, it was growing in a way that the aliens could not counter with conventional military responses. Include everything, Kate ordered. I want the committee to understand that we are not just building better weapons. We are changing the fundamental nature of how wars are fought in this galaxy. As Frank left her office to prepare the briefing, Kate remained at her desk, studying the reports from across human space. Each successful battle, each captured alien vessel, each salvage operation added to humanity's growing technological advantage. The major powers of the galaxy had spent centuries perfecting their technology and their military doctrine. They had created weapons and shields and ships that represented the pinnacle of scientific achievement. They had established protocols and procedures that governed how civilized species should conduct warfare. But they had made one critical error in their calculations. They had assumed that primitive species would always remain primitive, that technological advancement was a slow and predictable process that followed established patterns. They had never considered what would happen when a species like humanity decided to ignore all the rules. Kate activated her communication system and opened a channel to Lisa Warren's research facility. The scientist appeared on screen, surrounded by the organized chaos of her laboratory. Behind her, Kate could see engineers working on devices that looked like they had been assembled by someone with a very creative imagination and a complete disregard for conventional engineering principles. Dr. Warren, Kate said, I need an update on our current capabilities and future prospects. Lisa smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had just solved an impossible puzzle. Admiral, we are making progress faster than I ever thought possible. The alien technology we have collected represents thousands of years of scientific advancement across dozens of different species. Each civilization developed different approaches to the same basic problems, and when we combine those approaches, we get solutions that none of them ever imagined. Kate leaned forward in her chair. Give me specifics. We have developed shield technology that adapts in real time to whatever weapons are being used against it, Lisa explained. We have created weapons that can reconfigure themselves during combat to exploit whatever weaknesses they detect in enemy defenses. We have built sensor systems that can track enemy vessels through dimensions that most species do not even know exist. Kate tried to imagine what conventional military forces would do when faced with weapons that changed their own capabilities during battle. How are we able to accomplish things that civilizations with thousands of years of experience could not? Lisa gestured at the hybrid devices surrounding her. Because we are not trying to build perfect technology, Admiral. We are building adaptive technology. Every other species in the galaxy designs their systems to work within specific parameters and to fail safely when those parameters are exceeded. She picked up a device that looked like alien technology held together with human determination. But we design our systems to keep working no matter what happens. When our weapons encounter something they were not designed to handle, they adapt. When our shields face attacks they were not built to deflect, they evolve. When our sensors detect something that should not exist, they figure out how to track it anyway. Kate began to understand the implications of what Lisa was describing. You are saying that our technology learns from combat experience. Exactly, Lisa confirmed. Every battle teaches our systems something new about how to fight more effectively. Every encounter with alien technology gives us new insights into how to integrate different approaches to the same problems. Kate stood up from her desk and walked closer to the communication screen. Dr. Warren, how long before we can begin? large-scale production of these adaptive systems. Lisa consulted a data pad that was covered with technical diagrams and production schedules. Admiral, we already have prototype installations on 12 human vessels. Full production could begin within 3 months, assuming we can maintain our current rate of salvage operations. Kate nodded. What do you need from me to make that happen? More salvage teams, Lisa replied immediately. Every alien civilization approaches technology differently, and each new source of components gives us new possibilities for innovation. The hegemony worlds use crystalline computing systems that operate on quantum principles we are just beginning to understand. The Outer Rim cartels have developed stealth technology that bends space-time in ways that should be impossible. Kate made notes on her personal data pad. I will assign additional salvage teams to priority targets. What else? Personnel, Lisa continued. I need more engineers who are willing to ignore conventional wisdom and try approaches that would horrify any respectable scientist. I need technicians who think that safety protocols are suggestions rather than requirements. I need people who look at broken alien technology and see opportunities instead of problems. Kate smiled at that. Dr. Warren, you just described most of the human military. That is exactly my point, Admiral. Other species train their engineers to follow established procedures and to avoid taking unnecessary risks. They want their technology to work predictably and safely. Lisa gestured again at her laboratory full of hybrid devices. But humans have never been very concerned with playing it safe. We have been making dangerous things work since we invented fire. We have been pushing technology beyond its intended limits since we built the first steam engine. Kate understood what Lisa was saying. The aliens had technological superiority, but humans had something that no other species possessed, a willingness to take risks that any sensible civilization would consider insane. Dr. Warren, I am authorizing unlimited resources for your research projects, personnel, equipment, materials, whatever you need to accelerate development of our adaptive technology. Lisa smiled. Thank you, Admiral. With unlimited resources, I can have weapon systems that make our current capabilities look primitive. Kate thought about the reports she had been reading about alien civilizations scrambling to understand how humanity had become a galactic military power, seemingly overnight. She thought about the Galactic Council, debating theories about exotic matter and unknown energy sources, while completely missing the simple truth. Dr. Warren, how long before the aliens figure out what we are actually doing? Lisa considered the question for a moment. Admiral, I do not think they ever will. Understanding what we have accomplished would require them to abandon every assumption they have about how technology should work. They would have to accept that their own discarded equipment could be turned against them by a species they consider primitive. Kate nodded. And they are too proud to admit that possibility. More than that, Lisa replied, they are too civilized. They cannot imagine building technology that ignores safety protocols, that operates outside design parameters, that adapts and evolves and changes during combat. They want their weapons to work the same way every time they are used. Kate looked back at the tactical display on her desk. The galaxy was about to discover that humans had never been very interested in doing things the same way every time. The Krothak hegemony had ruled their corner of the galaxy for over 1,000 years, and Fleet Admiral Zaxton had never seen a battle that his forces could not win through sheer technological superiority. His fleet of 200 warships represented the finest military technology that the hegemony had developed over centuries of conquest and expansion. Each vessel in his fleet was a masterpiece of engineering, equipped with weapons that could shatter planets and shields that had never been breached in combat. The smallest ship in his formation carried more firepower than entire human battle groups, and his flagship alone could probably destroy every vessel that Earth had ever built. At least, that had been true before the humans had started turning alien garbage into weapons of war Roy Parker, stood on the bridge of the Resolve and studied the incoming Krothak fleet through his tactical displays. 47 human vessels faced 200 alien warships in what should have been the most one-sided battle in galactic history. By every measure of conventional military analysis, the human fleet should surrender immediately or be destroyed in the opening minutes of combat. But Roy Parker had not built his career by following conventional military analysis. "Admiral Zaxton is opening a communication channel," reported his communications officer. The main screen filled with the image of a Krothak warrior, whose species had evolved from predators that had once hunted in the deep forests of their homeworld. Zaxton was covered in ritual scars that marked his victories in combat, and his eyes held the cold intelligence of someone who had never lost a battle. "Human Commander," Zaxton said in the Universal Translator's flat voice, "you face the assembled might of the Krothak hegemony. 200 warships, each one more powerful than your entire fleet combined. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift and honorable." Roy studied the alien admiral for a moment. Zaxton had the confidence of someone who had never encountered an enemy that could challenge his technological advantages. The Krothak had built their empire by overwhelming primitive species with weapons that operated far beyond anything their enemies could comprehend or counter. "Admiral Zaxton," Roy replied calmly, "you are about to learn why you should not leave your trash where humans can find it." The alien admiral's features showed confusion for a moment, then shifted to contempt. "Your primitive vessels cannot threaten ships of the hegemony. We have analyzed your recent victories against the Kaltorians and the Sepharians. Your weapons may be effective against second-rate military forces, but you now face the finest fleet in the galaxy." Roy almost smiled at that. The Krothak were so confident in their superiority that they had not bothered to study the human victories carefully enough to understand what had actually happened. They assumed that human success against other alien forces was simply a matter of humans having slightly better technology than they had previously possessed. They had no idea that human technology was built from the discarded refuse of their own civilization. "Admiral," Roy said, "you are welcome to test that theory." Zaxton cut the communication and immediately ordered his fleet to attack. 200 Krothak warships opened fire in perfect formation, their weapons coordinated by tactical computers that had calculated the optimal approach to destroying a primitive enemy force. The barrage of energy that struck the human fleet should have been enough to sterilize several planets. Plasma cannons, particle beams, and exotic energy weapons unleashed destruction on a scale that few species in the galaxy had ever witnessed. The human ships absorbed the attack without significant damage. On the bridge of the Krothak flagship, tactical officers stared at their instruments in disbelief. The energy readings from the human fleet made no sense according to any known principles of defensive technology. The human shields were not just deflecting the Krothak weapons. They were somehow converting the incoming energy into power for their own systems. "Admiral," reported the tactical officer, "the human defensive systems are operating outside all known parameters. Our weapons are actually strengthening their shields, rather than depleting them." Zaxton stared at the tactical display with growing confusion. "That is impossible. No known technology can convert directed energy weapons into shield power." But the humans were not using known technology. They were using hybrid systems that combined Krothak shield generators with Sepharian power converters and Vulcan energy manipulators, all controlled by human-made computers that had been programmed to ignore the safety limitations that the original designers had built into their systems. Roy Parker watched the Krothak weapons fire splash harmlessly against his fleet's defenses, and felt a satisfaction that went beyond simple tactical advantage. Every component in his ship's defensive systems had once belonged to the Krothak, or their allies. The aliens were being defeated by their own discarded technology, enhanced and modified by human engineers who had never learned that some things were supposed to be impossible. "All ships," Roy transmitted to his fleet, "commence attack pattern." Alpha, show them what we built from their garbage. The human fleet opened fire, and the weapons that emerged from their hulls defied every principle of known military technology. These were not the clean, efficient energy beams that civilized species used in warfare. These were chaotic, adaptive weapons that changed their own characteristics based on whatever targets they encountered. Beth Adams commanded the Scavenger, a vessel that looked like it had been assembled in a junkyard by someone with an unlimited imagination and a complete disregard for conventional engineering principles. Her primary weapon was built around a Keltorian waste disposal system that had been modified to launch projectiles at velocities that should have been impossible. The projectiles themselves were pieces of Krothic hull armor that had been salvaged from old battlefields and enhanced with human technology. When they struck enemy vessels, they did not simply punch through the hull. Instead, they burrowed into the ship's structure and began converting whatever they encountered into more projectiles. The first Krathok destroyer to be hit by Beth's weapon simply came apart from the inside as its own hull material was turned against it. Danny Rodriguez had been assigned to the Retribution, where he commanded a weapons array that was based on mining equipment from 6 different alien civilizations. The aliens had designed these tools to break apart asteroids for resource extraction. But Danny had found ways to focus their output into beams that could disrupt the quantum foundations of matter itself. When Danny's weapon struck a cruiser, the ship did not explode in the conventional sense. Instead, it began to phase in and out of normal space-time as the bonds holding its atoms together became unstable. Across the human fleet, similar scenes played out as weapons that should not have existed destroyed ships that had been considered invincible. Each human vessel carried technology that operated according to principles that no galactic civilization had ever developed, because no galactic civilization had ever been desperate enough to ignore every safety protocol and design limitation that stood between them and survival. Admiral Zaxton watched his fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy that his instruments insisted should not have been able to threaten even a single Krothok patrol boat. The human weapons were causing damage that violated the known laws of physics, and their defensive systems were operating at efficiency levels that exceeded theoretical maximums. All ships, focus fire on the human command vessel, Zaxton ordered. In desperation, concentrate every weapon we have on their flagship. 50 Krothak warships turned their combined firepower on the Resolve. The energy output was enough to crack the crust of a planet, focused into a concentrated beam that should have vaporized any target in the galaxy. The beam struck the Resolve's shields and was immediately absorbed, converted, and redirected back at the Krothak fleet. The humans had built their defensive systems using technology from the Krothak's own discarded research projects, including experimental energy converters that the aliens had abandoned because they were too dangerous to use safely. But the humans had never been particularly concerned with using technology safely. The redirected energy struck the Krothak formation and destroyed 12 ships in a single blast. The remaining vessels found themselves facing an enemy that could turn their own weapons against them, that could adapt to any attack, and that seemed to grow stronger with every exchange of fire. Admiral Roy Parker transmitted to the surviving Krothak ships, "You might want to reconsider your waste disposal procedures." Zaxton stared at the tactical display that showed the wreckage of half his fleet. The human vessels had not just defeated the pride of the Krothak Navy. They had done it using technology that the Krothak themselves had thrown away as worthless. "How?" Zaxton asked, his voice barely a whisper. Roy smiled grimly. "Admiral, your people spent centuries building the most advanced technology in the galaxy. You created weapons and shields and systems that represented the pinnacle of scientific achievement." The human commander gestured at his own ship, which was built around salvaged alien technology held together with human determination. "But you made one critical mistake. You assumed that advanced technology could only be used in the ways you intended it to be used. Roy's tactical display showed the remaining Krathak ships beginning to retreat, their formation broken, and their confidence shattered. You never considered what would happen if someone came along who was willing to ignore all your assumptions and limitations. As the Krathak fleet fled the battlefield, leaving behind the wreckage of what had once been the most powerful naval force in their region of the galaxy, Roy reflected on what had just happened. The major powers of the galaxy had spent millennia perfecting their technology and their military doctrine. They had created weapons that could destroy worlds and shields that could deflect any known attack, but they had built all of their systems according to the same fundamental assumptions about how technology should work. They had designed their weapons to operate within acceptable parameters, their shields to fail safely when overloaded, and their systems to follow predictable patterns that enemy forces could study and counter. Humans had never been very good at accepting assumptions or following predictable patterns. The age of human expansion had begun, built on the foundation of alien technology that had been discarded as worthless junk. The galaxy was about to discover that one civilization's garbage could become another civilization's greatest weapon, especially when that civilization was willing to ignore every rule about how things were supposed to work. The message that Roy Parker sent to Earth Command was simple. Mission accomplished. The galaxy now knows that humans can turn anything into a weapon. Recommend immediate expansion of salvage operations.